Hello and welcome to the Uppercase podcast. I'm your host Anjana, and every week I get trailblazers to tell you about the habits, practices, and beliefs to which they credit their success and happiness. My guest today is Luis Miranda, who helped build two highly successful companies, HDFC Bank and IDFC Private Equity. Luis is chairman of the Center for Civil Society in Coro. Along with his wife Fiona, he's actively involved with a long list of philanthropic organizations. He is also the chairman of Manipal Cigna Health Insurance, senior advisor at Morgan Stanley, and an advisor to L&T Sufin and GMR Infrastructure. In 2018, Luis also co-founded the Indian School of Public Policy. Luis, thank you for taking the time to be with us today. To begin, how do you manage your time?
Anjana, first of all, thank you for having me over. It's a pleasure and good to catch up with you after so many years. How do I manage my time? Google Calendars.
Okay.
It's as simple as that. Everything I do, the family. It's a big joke in the family that when I wake up, when I sort of go to the toilet, when I sort of have a shower, it's not as bad as that. But
cup of coffee.
cup of coffee. So it's all over there, and if it's not in my calendar, it just slips my mind here because life's so crazy. And every evening I actually sit back and say, okay, what's tomorrow going to be like? Because every day is different because of the different organizations I'm involved with.
Right.
But this whole thing of Google Calendars, this looks like a plug for Google, but our anniversary cake 4 years ago for our 25th wedding anniversary was a picture of a Google Calendar page of the date when we got married.
Oh, God.
And my life is run by Google Calendars.
When did Fiona and you get married? You met in 89?
We met on the 21st of September, 1985.
Okay.
And it was a couple of months before my CA final examinations. I should have been studying. Instead, I was at a party. And
so no Google Calendar then.
No Google Calendar then, absolutely no. And she was told that I'm a bad guy. She should stay away from me. And,
Which you were.
I thought I was a good guy. My mother thought differently, but and then after my exams, I asked her out. So she sort of came up with 100 reasons as to why she couldn't go out with me. And I guess I came up with 101 reasons why she should. So we went out. Our first date, she had ended up pushing the car because the car broke down. And then we sort of went our own way.
Pushing the car. How wonderful.
It's true. And then we ended up. I went off to Dubai for a year. Then she went to the US, and we lost touch for many years.
Right.
There's a story about Valentine cards we can get to if you need to later.
Yes.
And
always.
and then we bumped into each other after I came back.
And picked up where you left off.
Yeah, and I've been 2 years in the US, and I learned how to speak properly and what I should do and should not do. She'd been many years in the US, and her bar had got lowered. So in 89, and then we decided to get married, and we got married in Jan 93, and then she went back to the US to finish off her PhD, and yeah, that's that. That's our story.
So one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about, I thought I'd do it later, but since we're on the topic now, Fiona has talked about how you have date nights scheduled.
Yep.
Yeah. So what is date night like?
So it all started off when I think I was at Chris Capital. So it must have been sometime in 2000, 2001. And it was really crazy. I'd be traveling a lot all over the world, meeting investors. And I'd come back. And when we were back in India also, we'd be talking at night to investors. And it wasn't spending time, with that. Right. And it's important in a relationship to spend time with each other. Communication is like, I think the big thing about
also
keeping together.
Also with your work colleagues, I think.
Colleagues and with the kids also, So... So we decided, okay, let's just pick a night again and block it in our Google Calendar. so that we then we said, okay, nothing happens on Tuesday, so let's block Tuesday night. And it's been like that for now, nearly 22, 23 years.
And but what's the point? So
to be together.
Just to be together, talk about anything.
Yeah, we could go for a movie, we could go for a walk, we could go out for dinner.
Okay.
And it's interesting, our kids would always have an issue when they were small about us going out. But on Tuesday nights, they would not make an issue.
Okay, well, because you scheduled it in for them as well.
It was in the calendar.
Right. But, I think that's such a great approach to things, right? Yeah. Like you said, communication is so important in every relationship. Is this also, something that you do at work where you have like this open door policy where people can sort of walk in and ask you questions or sort of just address their concerns about anything that you're doing?
Absolutely, Anjana. It's this whole issue of why does chaos happen is because people don't trust each other. That
Right.
trust gap or deficit comes in the way of relationships. And the best way to sort of remove this trust deficit is by communication.
Right.
And to me, this was given, and I'll come back to the work part, but I was given this example by a guy called Matt something, who was at that time working with General Atlantic Partners. And I met him about 6-7 years ago. He used to work for the US State Department, and he told me about how for some 20 years he was leading the peace negotiations between Greece and Macedonia.
Okay.
So I said, but I didn't know that there was a trouble between that. And he said, that's the beauty, because they've been talking for 20 years. There's never been a war. There's never been an issue. And it's only about a year or so ago that this whole dispute got resolved. But, the fact is, it's just that communication which therefore kept people from fighting with each other. And as you're seeing now with Russia and Ukraine, etc., it's that if there was dialogue and proper dialogue, you would have avoided this. So come back to work. I've been a tough boss here. But at the same time, always had an open door for people to talk. I don't believe in hierarchies. We'd have at HDFC Bank or at IDFC, there was always this thing that at a firm, at a team meeting, there was no sort of hierarchy. Anyone could talk what they want. And to me, the best compliment I got from any of my colleagues was when a guy called Chandar Sethi was migrating to Canada. This is at HDFC Bank many years back. And when he left, he told me, Louis, you've been the toughest boss I've ever had, but you've been the fairest. And I think that's what's important. I mean, work has to get done.
Yeah.
But as long as you're fair, and what is fairness? I remember one day at IDFCP, one of my colleagues came up to me and told me, Louis, I'm very upset you've taken on somebody else at a higher salary than me. And I've been working here so much longer. And I knew this was going to happen because there were certain reasons why it had to get done. And I told him, do you trust me? He said, yes. And I said, just give me 3 months. I knew what was going to happen because there was a salary revision coming up 3 months later. And I said, you're going to get it over there. But I can't do it in midway. Right. So that's really, it's all about communication. I think most problems in this world happen because people don't talk to each other.
Sure.
Or they're talking at each other as opposed to talking to each other.
That's true. So, we were talking about, we moved into Fiona and then everything else, but we were talking about you managing time because you're always taking up new things. And 2 years ago, you co-founded the Indian School of Public Policy. You've already got so much going on. Why is this so important to you?
So... I wasn't aware of this concept of public policy as a sort of a profession. It was there always at the periphery. But a few years ago, maybe around 2013, I was introduced to Parth Shah, who was like, my partner in crime, and I guess the person I spent a significant amount of time with. And he started an organization called the Center for Civil Society. And... and he started this some 23 years ago, to talk about public policy to young Indians. Right. He moved back from the University of Michigan where he was teaching. And along the way, when we talked to our alumni, they talked about how this iPolicy program that we run has been the most interesting thing that they've been involved with. And we said, should we run a larger program, but where are the jobs? And then finally, when we realized that time was right for jobs, we said, let's get started on this. Right. And I look back, I've been a beneficiary of public policy changes. HDFC Bank, in 1993, the government announced the setting up of private sector banks. Right. That was a public policy initiative, and that changed my life. It's the first time that I was involved in a startup. Yeah. It's the first time that I, a few years later when the stocks became valuable, the first time I had some decent money in the bank. You actually had a website where you talked about, things before 91. Yes, India before 91. And today, youngsters talk about, the evils of capitalism, etc. They just need to go back to their website and see what life was like when you had socialism running us. It was not a pleasant sort of world for a lot of people. Yeah, absolutely. And then, and in 2002, the government announced the setting up of an infrastructure equity fund, which the the private sector would play a role in running. And then again, I had a chance to set that up and understand the world of infrastructure. And, so I've been a beneficiary of public policy changes, the positives of it. And we've also seen the negatives of it.
I'm sure.
So we said, let's set this up. And, Parth's actually the intellectual amongst the two of us. And he's also Gujarati, so he's also the business guy in the two of us. So I don't even know what my role is here. I think I just connect dots here. But he came across, so he said, let's do this for two purposes. One is to democratize public policy education in India, because more people study public policy outside India than in India.
But how does that apply then in India? Isn't it a completely different ballgame in terms of, how the rules work?
Sure. And that's why. So that's it. So they go study overseas. They spend 70 lakhs to 1.5 crore over there. And they've learned a different environment. And it's not easy to apply it back. And secondly, if you want a career in public policy, you can't get that salary to recover that cost if you come back to India.
Absolutely.
So you're forced to stay overseas or take up a sort of a corporate job, etc. So that's a challenge. So we said, let's see how we can develop it in India with a 21st century pedagogy and flexibility. So we decided that we will not get ourselves constrained by any of the rules which govern educational institutions now, and have that flexibility. So the one is democratizing, and the secondly is building out state capacity. So we've got this full term, this 1 year postgraduate program. We've started for the first time, a Hindi program to teach public policy. That's a hybrid model.
Right.
We're starting a program to sort of teach it online to college students. We're working with the government. So there's a variety of things that we're looking at, because we're also working with a sort of a global management consulting firm to see how we can make public policy something aspirational for people to do, because it touches our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love the courses that you have, right? I mean, you've obviously got courses on urban governance, and you've got law and economics in there, but also, I mean, game theory, critical thinking, human behavior. I mean, I think that there'd be so many people who'd want to sign up for this, but I mean, is it open to everyone?
It is. It's open to everyone. We're actually in admissions now. It turned out to be an admissions plug, but no. We're open for admissions, but it is. I mean, we're looking for people, when we started, we said, what type of student do we want?
Yeah.
And I was very clear, and I think the rest of the team also is, that we don't want to have the smartest kid. We want the one who's most interesting.
Yeah.
Someone who's engaged. Someone who wants to change the world. Someone who wants to have a purpose.
Right.
And that's the sort of, and to me, I've just been fascinated by the scholars. We call them scholars. The scholars we have on board. They just come, just bring a breadth of experience.
Yeah.
They challenge us a lot. They irritate us a lot at times also. And then what's also been interesting is just the faculty we have. Our dean, Subhashish, who's like, the third sort of founder, our founding dean. He's been amazing to bring in his network and bring in some fascinating people like Krishna Ladda, Sanjay Baru, NC Saxena.
So they come in as guest speakers.
They come in as guest lecturers. No, they run the whole course, and the energy that they have is just fabulous. We have our associate dean Neeti Shika, who.
She worked with the government on the bankruptcy and
absolutely, and she learned public policy when she was a young lady at CCS. So she comes in with a different perspective, and we're trying to build out a unique approach to it. We've got a tie-up with the University of Chicago, the Harris School, but we're sort of still miles away. So when we started, you asked, how do we get together? We also went across because we need money to get started off. Right. And people like Nandan Nilekani, Vallabh Bhanshali, Nadir Godrej, Jerry Rao, all pitched in over here to help us get started.
Right.
One of our board members is Vidya Shah, who's just, fabulous person who, just brings in her networks and challenges us about, why we're doing certain things, etc.
Right.
And that's really...
But was the idea something that y'all had bounced around, between, Mr. Shah and, Mr. Gangopadhyay, and is this something that y'all had sort of discussed before?
It's something which you get talking about, and then, suddenly, you sort of, it's like you're circling, and then bang, now it's the time to get started.
Right. And then COVID happened.
Oh, no, that's an interesting one. But before that, we said, let's get started. So around 2018, we said we'll get started and we'll start the school a year later. And people said that's too short a period. And we said we will get it done. And we got it done.
Yeah.
And then you're right. Our first batch graduated during COVID. And that was like the worst time to graduate a batch of students in a field that employers don't understand.
You're right.
So that was a nightmare. And, but we had it was not an obligation, but it was a responsibility that we had to place them. And it took us some time, but that's something which we've been very happy is that we placed that whole batch.
Right.
We've placed our second batch again also. So we end with 100% placement.
Oh, fantastic.
And the average salary they're getting is more than the cost of the program. So
Right.
I think that's been a fabulous turnaround for
fantastic.
a startup in a new
Very
field.
encouraging. Yeah, absolutely. I also wanted to talk about the reason I was asking about how you got started with ISVP is because obviously one of the things that you've written about in your blogs, and you've been blogging for Forbes and for Thrive Global and for Spontaneous Order. And one of the things you've written about often is the connections and the importance of the connections that you've made. And I think it's modesty when you say that, it's, opportunities have been thrown your way because, obviously there's initiative and there's talent that you're just ignoring there. But, when you talk about these happy coincidences, what is luck to you? I'd love to know. I mean, is it just, your stars aligning at the right time, or is it also initiative? Is it also human intuition?
I'm Forrest Gump here. So in fact, Mihika, our daughter, many years, when she was in school, she studied Photoshop. So I asked her to sort of morph my picture onto Tom Hanks. And that's the only time I had Tom Hanks' body here. But to me, it's all about, I think luck has played a large role. Everything that I've done in the last 33 years since I finished business school is because somebody else has suggested it to me. Okay. Coming back to India, joining HSBC, joining HDFC Bank, Chris Capital, IDFC P, CCS, ISPP, Cora. Every time it's something which someone else has come and suggested it to me. So, and I believe that it's those Forrest Gump moments that have defined my life. Also, people talk about, big words like serendipity, etc., which I don't understand. But besides luck, and people say, is it just luck or do you create that luck for yourself?
Yes.
So I went back to Google to check up, how do people create luck here? And I came across this great article which talked about, if you do things differently, if you think positive, if you see the good in everything that even goes wrong, you will create luck for yourself. And I guess that's what I've done.
And did it elaborate on how that works?
Yes.
How does it work for you?
So, for example, IDFC Private Equity. Okay. So the government announced, the finance minister announces this in the budget on 20th of February 2002.
2 weeks.
And in April, I reach out to Deepak Parekh. I call him and tell him, Deepak, I want to do something different in life. And we talk about mentors. Deepak's one of my mentors.
Yes.
And I reached out to him and said, listen, Deepak, I want to do something. I've had enough of this technology stuff at Chris Capital, and I want to do something on the development side. He said, you want to go back to the bank? I said, no, I don't. The banking days are over. He said, come meet me tomorrow. So I go to him and he says, Louis, we've got this mandate from the government to set up a fund, an equity fund. Why don't you set it up and run it? And I said, sounds good. And then I suddenly realized I've never made an investment in my life. I've never I knew nothing about infrastructure. And here am I setting up.
How old were you, Louis?
Good question. How old was I? 22. So 40 years. 40.
Okay. 40. So that's reassuring, I think, for a lot of people out there. At 40, you hadn't made an investment?
Yeah. Of size, yeah. And here was I going to set up. But the reason for the story was IDFC had already talked to a few other people about this role. And they all thought either it was stupid or it was too risky. And instead I looked at it and said, wow, there's an opportunity. Everyone told me you'll not raise the money. You will not be able to make money investing in infrastructure. And over the years, I've realized when someone says it cannot be done, I have to try it.
Oh, fantastic.
So that's it.
Yeah.
So that's the luck. So it's a combination of getting things thrown at you, and also grabbing those opportunities which others didn't like. In '89, it was not fashionable to come back to India.
Why did you come back?
Oh, because I couldn't get a decent job in the US. It's as simple as that.
After you graduated from Chicago Booth?
Yeah, so 1989, soon after I went to Booth in 87, a month or two later, they had the stock market crash of 87.
Okay.
And then the economy took a long time to get back. So it was tough getting a job.
Yeah.
And so I, again, through connecting the dots, I got an internship in New York, thanks to a friend called Victor Menezes, another sort of mentor of mine.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was all set to go back and work up there. But that was in an accounting/finance role, and I was not excited particularly about it.
Mm-hmm.
And the offers that I was getting in India, because I was chartered accountant, was to do with, reporting, financial control, and I wanted to do something different. And I get an invitation to, those were the pre-internet era, so I get a letter in the mail saying that, we'd like you to come and interview for the Asia Pacific region at Citibank. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't going to go back. But to me, it was a free trip to New York. So again, it's a Forrest Gump moment. I call up a friend. They gave me 2 dates. You could either go in December for the interview or November or in January. And a friend of mine said in January, those days she was going skiing. So in November I went and I wasn't keen on the job. So we went out for dinner. I got totally drunk. I couldn't remember the name of my hotel. I had this plastic card over there. And the first guy I met the next day was someone from Citibank Hong Kong who irritated me. The second was a guy from Citibank Singapore. And that time my hangover was kicking in. But this third interview was with Jaidev Iyer. And Jaidev tells me, Louis, within 5 minutes, what do you think about marketing foreign exchange products in India? And I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. And, and I come out of that interview saying, and then he said, listen, let's talk more. So he bought me lunch and to me, this was an exciting job.
Yeah, sure.
And it paid peanuts.
Yeah.
But I thought that was worth the effort.
So this story that I read about you in Business Standard, Anjali Bhargava's article, where she says Luis Miranda had the dubious distinction of graduating with the lowest salary in his Chicago Booth class back in 1989.
Yep.
The software at the school that published weekly lists of the pay packages offered to students was unable to process his submission because his annual salary was $4,000, while the minimum option listed was $20,000. So, I mean, today, obviously, you're teaching at the Accelerated Development Program of Chicago Booth. You're a trustee of the University of Chicago Trust in India, a member of the Global Leaders Group and the Advisory Council of the Rustandi Center for Social Sector Innovation at Chicago Booth. So I mean, it's been quite a journey since then. But I'm still curious to know. So this was the $4,000 job?
Yeah,
that was the fourth. And so you.
And again, if I didn't take this, and if I didn't take that, I wouldn't have met Fiona. Because I would have been stuck somewhere in the US. She would have, and we would never have met you. So
you met Fiona. You told your mom that this is the woman that you're going to marry. And she said, I'll believe it when I see it, because you used to date so much. And she wrote you a letter, which you then carried on to read at your wedding day. So, I wanted to know, obviously a few things from there. One of the things is pertaining again to relationships, because sure, you dated a lot, but isn't that important? Even when you're looking for a job, to try out different things, before you decide what works for you and what doesn't. Isn't that just the right approach to things?
Yeah. And I see it with our kids also, and I keep telling them, this is the age to experiment.
Uh-huh.
Don't do something stupid that you'll regret later.
Yeah. And don't be hurtful, I'm sure.
Yeah, and don't be hurtful also. Yeah. Well, I've heard a lot of people. That's idea. But something like I've done stupid things. But it's all about when I see people interviewing for jobs.
Yeah.
And you ask, what do you see yourself 5 years, 10 years later? I look back and say, I would have had no idea that 5 years later I'd be doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And so therefore, I guess it's just a way to understand people's thinking. So everyone goes in an interview saying, I plan to work here for the next 10 years. What a lot of nonsense here. So anyway, I think people need to experiment, need to sort of move around. But at the same time also, by just flitting from one place to the other without a real reason is also pointless, because you learn nothing on the way.
Absolutely.
So I've changed a lot of jobs in my career, but I've always done it for a reason other than money.
Okay.
Quite often I've changed jobs at a lower salary than my previous one.
Okay.
Because I was just excited about the opportunity, or it gave me a significant bump in status, or it moved me away from what I was doing earlier. But people moving from one job to another for a few sort of thousands, etc., to me is...
Which is actually something that I wanted to talk to you about because, of course, we're in the middle of this whole startup storm.
Sure.
And, crazy valuations and, huge figures being thrown about, but also a time when the IT industry is seeing, really high rates of attrition.
A lot of people talk about comping an issue. I've been open about the fact that, when I started out working, I didn't get a high comp. I didn't have money in the bank for 5 because people tell me, Louis, it's great to talk about purpose. It's great to talk about all this stuff because you have money. And in 1989, I did not have money. When we started HDFC Bank, I didn't have money in the bank here.
Yeah.
I started learning how to cook because one day there was no money in the bank and there was no money. I've been overdrawn on our credit cards here. So, but it's about... I got lost. What was the question?
So what makes people stay? And why
Okay,
do they
sure.
leave jobs?
Okay, I firmly believe that people leave jobs because their boss is a jerk.
Not approachable.
Not approachable, mean, nasty, not adding value. People will come up with a whole lot of reasons about why. And I've looked back at my own careers and and quite often when headhunters remember one of them, 2 private equity funds telling Deepak Parekh years ago, what's wrong with you? You've got a great guy called Luis Miranda because we're trying to talk to him and he won't even take our calls. I firmly believe that people leave bosses. They don't leave jobs.
Right.
Now, there are obviously exceptions. For example, if for example your company is not doing well, okay, you're worried about the future or things like that. But otherwise, it's who your supervisor is and the environment of the organization.
So, Louis, you've mentioned Deepak Parekh a couple of times now. You've written about him being your mentor. I think Aditya Puri as well, being a mentor. And you are a co-founder of Take Charge, which is a mentorship program for Catholic youth in Mumbai. You've also written for us at Mumbai Mirror about the importance of mentorship, right? So I wanted to ask you firstly, how does one find a mentor? How important is it? At what stage of life? And also personally, if you can tell me how this is sort of, why it's so important to you.
Thanks, Anjana. And thanks, by the way, for that opportunity to write for it in midday.
Mumbai Mirror. That's okay. You can say it. It's fine. I work for Midday too.
Okay. So, oops. So I've been lucky that I've had advice from a variety of people over the years. And we didn't call them mentors at that time, but, my parents, my professors, my bosses at work, other adults in life, Fiona, they've all sort of, helped me on this journey to get me to where I am today. And also my kids. Our kids, have also played a role. So, and it all fell into place some years ago when Jerry Rao and I were at a class at Chicago Booth. He just won the award for Distinguished Alumnus. And we were talking at a class, I think, of Marvin Zonis. And Jerry talked about how it's lonely at the top.
Mm-hmm.
And I was speaking after him and I said, Jerry, I don't feel lonely at the top because I've surrounded myself with people who I can go to, one of them being you. Okay. Jerry was my mentor. And therefore, and I always believed you make yourself as lonely as you want to make it.
Sure.
Because there's so many people out there who can go to help. So, and I've been asked, therefore, over time, how do you find a mentor? Yeah. And again, I don't have anything scientific to say, but it's just talking to people. I guess you don't go to somebody and say, will you mentor me? But rather just have a conversation. You find that they can I be in touch? And, and all the people who I've called mentors, I don't think I ever told them, will you be my mentor? But they just ended up being my mentor. Right. So people like Vijay Kelkar, who's chairman of our academic advisory board at the Indian School of Public Policy. Mm-hmm. Someone like M. Chandrasekhar, who is this guy I got to meet when I was at Chris Capital, who ended up giving me the most important advice that I think I've received in life. I was in his car one day in Bangalore way back in, I think, 2002. Mm-hmm. And I was very hassled about something happening. And he takes out this picture. It's a small frame picture of Lord Ganesh. Okay. He says, Louis, I know you're Catholic, But keep this on your desk, and whenever you're irritated, look at it and remember what I'm going to tell you. And what he told me was focus on the important things in life.
Okay, it's a great
And that's
message.
been the best advice I've been given. Suddenly you realize that everything else is ridiculous. The challenge people have is figuring out what is important.
Right.
And when I got that advice, I was like 40. And to me, the most important things in life were my 2 kids and Fiona. And, anything else that, it came as a result of it was really related to that. If an investment was going bad, if someone was irritating me, my question was, how did it impact
Yeah.
Fiona and the kids? And if it didn't impact, then it's not important.
Well, thank you so much. This has been great. Thank you for your time, Luis. And thank you for coming all the way to meet me.
No,
I
Anjana, it's
really
been a
appreciate it.
pleasure. I'm glad we've been talking about getting together for a long time and
It's
finally
absolutely
got to
great
do
have
this.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you.